Good morning, everyone. My name is Paul, and I am a nerd, and you are lucky enough to be attending our Coffee Pot webinar here and now on Friday, the something of November. What is it, the 14th of November, 2014? And this month, our November Coffee Pot webinar is about something called Symphony Profiler. Now, before we get started on what that means, let me just cover this. This is the GoToWebinar control panel. And so if you are still seeing this, it's because you haven't pressed this button here that looks like an arrow pointing to the right. That button that looks like an arrow pointing to the right will cause this to slide right off your screen and make it possible for you to see whatever is underneath it, which is probably my screen. So you probably want to get rid of this control panel. Just click this button. When you do that, this button will turn into an arrow that looks more like one that would point to the left. And that's because if you click it again, it will slide this back into focus. Why would you want to slide that back into focus? Because you're shy and you have a question. We have a place right here where you can type a question. Remember to hit send. Leanne are humble and apparently hungry. I was going to say apparently hungry, but she's not eating. She's doing something else. She's cleaning her glasses. Leanne are humble, and a humble moderator with the clean glasses will recognize that you have a question. She will interrupt me at an opportune time. She will ask your question on your behalf, and she will be monitoring to make sure that you're not typing more questions because, A, I tend to ramble and get off track. So if I do that, make sure that you keep me on track by, if I'm answering the wrong question, for instance, just keep typing your question here or keep prompting me to go in the right direction. Or if you have follow-up questions as I'm answering your question, again, keep typing them here. Keep remembering to hit send. Leanne will keep interrupting me, and we will get your question answered. Now, if you are not shy, you can press this button here, which looks like a hand with an arrow pointing upward in front of it, and that's because it means raise your hand. And if you raise your hand, Leanne will do pretty much the same thing. She will interrupt me at an opportune time, but instead of reading your question, she will unmute your microphone and let you ask your own question. Now, that channel of communication will be open until I'm done answering your question. I tell you this for two reasons. No Fritos or potato chips while your channel of communication is open. And B, you will have that opportunity to continue talking to me as I'm answering your question. So again, if I go down the wrong track or you have follow-up questions, just keep talking to me and I'll keep making sure I answer your question properly. So without any further ado, I'm going to press a couple buttons here and see if I can't get rid of that thing and go over to this thing and press this button here and Symphony Profiler. What is Symphony Profiler? Now, for starters, some of the people here, Scott and Kimberly, their firm, I believe, already has Symphony Suite. Now, I'm not entirely certain. Sometimes we used to always simply put Symphony Suite into place. And sometimes a client will say, well, we don't use that profiler thing, so let's go back to Symphony OCR. Now, that'll make sense in a second. But Symphony Suite is Profiler and OCR, and I'll tell you what OCR is in a minute, although that's not the focus of what we're talking about here. Symphony Profiler is the other parts of Symphony Suite. And it's one of those things that people don't really, they usually get Symphony Suite for one reason, OCRing documents, and they don't really understand what Symphony Profiler does, and we're going to learn about that today. It is a really kind of a neat concept, especially when you think about how work flows through your office and how you're getting stuff into your paperless environment, your Worldox environment, and how you can streamline that process, because that's exactly what Symphony Profiler does. So I'm going to press a couple more buttons, and we're going to start watching this video because there's no better way to show it, since I don't have a camera hooked up, than to let the people at Trumpet Software that make Symphony Profiler and Symphony OCR, and therefore Symphony Suite, describe it for you. Now, basically, it is a way to rapidly profile documents, scan them quickly without any interruptions, get them filed immediately, and it's all done with batches. So let's take a look at how that works. I'm going to kind of jump ahead here and get past the boring part. There we go. Here's how it works. I'm going to press this, and basically what happens is a knowledge worker, that's the attorney, the paralegal, the person who's making an hourly rate, they profile a document. Now, we'll see this in a second because I'll show you it on my own system. But you're familiar with this screen. This is the Worldox profile screen. Now yours may look a little different. For instance, we've got doc dates, which is something that we don't normally put on our clients' profiles. But this is the profile screen, okay? And what you're doing is you're filling that out even though the document's not been scanned yet. How do you do that? It's called making a reservation. And even though this is the profile screen from Worldox, we didn't get to it by saving a document into Worldox. We got to it by telling Symphony Profiler that we wanted to make a reservation. Now I'm going to go ahead and explain this, and then we're going to watch the process go. So, don't focus too much on this screen because I'm going to start this video up again in a second. I'm going to explain what happens. You have a stack of documents. Perhaps it's the mail, and you are the person that's responsible for putting either your part of the mail away or the whole firm's mail. Now, if you're putting the whole firm's mail away, you're probably a paralegal that bills by the hour. And if you're putting your mail away, well, then that's probably because you're an attorney and you've gotten a stack of 8 or 10 letters and pleadings and things, and you need to put them into Worldox. Now, in the old-fashioned world, what you do is you go over to the scanner and you individually scan each document and put it into a folder somewhere, or perhaps your scanner emails it to you. And then you open up the document, each one, figure out which one you're looking at based on the mail that you've probably still got in front of you, and then you put it away in Worldox. Now the problem with that is it takes a function that is A, a little bit cumbersome, and B, beyond the pay scale of that knowledge worker. And I'm talking specifically about the scanning part and the interruption of getting up and leaving your desk and going somewhere to do this, and figuring out how to do it, okay? I may be smart when it comes to computers, but this morning I couldn't figure out how to get paper into the printer. And if you asked me to order the paper from Office Max, I'd be totally lost. Lawyers and paralegals tend to, some of the lawyers especially, I don't mean to pick on you, Scott, or anybody else that's a lawyer, but they tend to be focused on the knowledge that they need to provide and not so good with things like scanning documents, okay? Now, let's turn that around with what we have Symphony Profiler for. You take this stack of mail, and before you scan it, and you're not even going to scan it, oh, I gave that part away. Before it gets scanned, you go through it, and you make a reservation for each document. And by reservation, I mean you fill in the profile for each document, and once you're done, you press this button. I'm going to go ahead and let this run through now. And what happens then is that it asks you for a reservation number. You've got a stack of paper on your desk with these numbers on it. These are called reservation forms. You take the barcoded document that has the reservation number, put it on top of that letter, and go on to the next document. So then you hit Make Reservation again. You make another reservation. You fill out another profile for the next document. You identify the barcoded piece of paper that's the next one on your stack by typing this simple 5-character number in. It's not really a number, but you get the point. And you place that on top. What you end up with is a very quick process where you go through your mail. You could go through 20 documents, and all you have to do is make the reservation for each document. Basically, fill out the Worldox profile. You indicate which numbered form you're putting on top of each document, and you end up with a stack with, in my example, 20 documents, each preceded by a page that has a reservation number. Go ahead and start this up again. What happens then, that page goes on top. You look at the next document. You put it on top, put the page on top. You take the documents with all those reservation numbers and all those individual documents, and you hand them to somebody. That somebody takes that to the scanner, scans it as one document, puts that entire stack in the paper feeder, scans it as one document, puts it in a folder the profiler knows to look at. Profiler comes along and takes that big document that's got those 20 individual Worldox documents, and as far as the operator is concerned, they're done. And Profiler then wakes up and says, hey, I got something to do. I'm going to take this big document and kind of break it down into little documents and put each document into the appropriate place in Worldox based on the reservation that the knowledge worker, I hate that term, the paralegal or attorney made ahead of time. And so what you're doing is you're turning the whole process on its side. The person who needs to decide what these documents are, how they're going to be described, what client and matter they go with, maybe has some notes to put in the comments field, that person takes that stack of mail, that stack of documents, pleadings, mail, whatever it is, goes through them, makes the appropriate reservations, puts the piece of paper on top and puts the reservation number in the computer, and they're done. There's no getting up. There's no going to do something. There's no figuring out the copier and the scanner and then sorting through 20 emails or going to a folder that has 20 individual documents. No, you're done. You make the reservations, you tie them to that reservation number, and you give it to somebody else that doesn't get paid as much as you and isn't wasting billable time by not doing something that's non-billable, which is the scanning part, and you're done. That's what Profiler does. It takes the whole process, streamlines it, turns it on its ear so that the part that is A, less enjoyable, B, non-billable, and C, somewhat cumbersome and technical, and therefore it may be below the pay scale of an attorney, but it may be above the technical expertise of an attorney, and gets rid of it as far as the attorney is concerned. So it takes something that may have taken 25, 30 minutes to take 20 or 30 documents and get them into the system, taking today's mail or whatever, and turns it into a process that really is only about 5 minutes long and doesn't require that you get up from your desk. That is Profiler. Now, how does it work? It is designed specifically to work with Worldox, just like the OCR software originally was. It can now, the OCR software, which we'll talk about in a second, it can now work outside of Worldox. Profiler can't. Obviously, it's designed to work with that reservation being the profile screen from Worldox. So if you want to get Profiler, it is essentially $65 per user per year. And if you want to get Profiler and OCR, you only pay a little bit extra. It's $90 per user per year. And if, just so you know, if you were to get OCR alone, it's $45 per user per year. So it's kind of a deal to get the suite, and it's kind of a given that this $65 a year per user is more than going to pay for itself. By the time that you're saving, that attorneys are not messing around with this stuff, or paralegals, and not only are they saving time, but the time that they're saving, they're probably billing on another matter because they're able to move on to another task. That is how it works. That is the pricing. Now, just in case you're curious, this OCR program, many of you have this. Kimberly and Scott, you both are using Symphony OCR. And it is just the next step. If you have a document that you've scanned, you want to make sure that it's readable. So if you're using Profiler, you really want to use the OCR thing too, because you don't want to have to go into Adobe and open up that document and make it readable, because you can. And readable, by that I mean, if you scan something on the scanner or the copier and you create a PDF, unless you have a very sophisticated scanner, and most of them don't do this, most of them rely on the software on the back end to do it, it doesn't really know that that's an I and that's a P and that's a Q and that's an O. All it knows is that if it puts the dots together in the right order, it will produce a replication or a facsimile, if you will, of this document. That's a lot like TV. It's a lot like a fax machine, and that's how scanning really works. It isn't until something comes along in the background and makes it readable, or OCRs it, which happens to stand for optical character recognition. Not until that happens is that document actually able to be searched. And of course, we all know, if you're looking at Profiler and thinking about the OCR part of it too, we all know that Worldox is a great way to search the text of documents. And those PDFs that you're scanning are not going to be searchable until you make them searchable. And that's what the OCR part of Symphony Suite does. Symphony OCR, which is the second half of Suite, the other part of Profiler. That program comes along in the background, recognizes that there are new PDFs that have been put into the system, checks to see if they're already readable, and if they're not, it simply makes them that way without anybody having to intervene. So that whole thing, those two things together, the Symphony Suite, really streamlines the scanning process from beginning to end. In the non-Symphony Suite, non-Profiler, non-OCR world, somebody has to scan documents, go back to their desk, open those documents up individually, and put them into Worldox. And if they don't have OCR capabilities, like Symphony OCR happening automatically, they also have to sit there and wait for that document to be OCR'd. Within a Symphony Suite world, somebody simply looks at the mail or whatever pile of documents need to be put into Worldox, profiles them, hands them to somebody else, and moves on to other billable things. And that's it. That's all we have. While we're thinking about it, I'm going to take you over here to the Attorney Computer Systems website, which happens to be www.attorneycomputersystems.com. Only because I want to show you that, you can go there and scroll down and actually see recorded versions of this webinar. It'll be there in about a week, of all of our virtual user groups for Tabs, Practice Master, and Worldox, of our e-byte video series, which is something Mary Jo does, that are little short 3- and 4-minute videos of really neat things that we've found, and our longer Paul and Mary Jo show format, which is longer videos where I or Mary Jo talk about something in a studio and then actually go to a computer and go to into great length on that particular subject. If you go to one of these pages, for instance, the coffeepot webinar series, you will see that it first shows the registration link for the next available webinar, which happens to be the one we're looking at right now. And if you scroll down, you'll see recorded versions of all the, in this instance, coffeepot webinars that we have done since we started recording. And we started recording these things, gosh, 3-4 years ago. So we have a lot of video content on our website, not just about Symphony Suite and Symphony OCR and Symphony Profiler, but about just about everything you could think of that has to do with Tabs 3, Practice Master, or Worldox. So that is it, everybody. Have a good rest of the day, and we will see you next month. Bye-bye.